George, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Colin. Happy to be here.
And when I was understanding about where the catalyst for your book came from, you were sharing that you lost both your parents in a really short period of time. And I was struck that sometimes from really tragic events come genuinely important and powerful things off the back of it. And I'm glad that you took something so positive from something that could have such a negative effect on somebody.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, to get the hard stuff out of the way, the book was really inspired by the passing of my parents, both of them pretty back to back to cancer, and after that I took a deep dive on epigenetics and kind of, genetically what could what could have happened or what could mean to me and my sister. And after I deep dive is when I learned that genetic predispositions are essentially like Christmas lights. You can have Christmas lights in your house, but if you don't like them, doesn't matter. And what lights are genetic predispositions is being in a state of fight or flight too long.
That's such a empowering message because I think some people hear like, oh, hereditary, this runs in my family or that runs in my family. And that can take away a lot of agency, or perhaps even more important than that, it can take away a lot of hope from people if they consider that their future is potentially doomed or damned by a particular hereditary bloodline they've got. That removes an awful lot of the sort of feelings that people that tune into a self-development podcast would want to have about their life, but you kind of rail against that.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, studies are now showing that we're not doomed by our genes. And basically, we need to do what we can. We need to bring in that rigor, that positivity, that way of being in which we can keep our agency and not be at the effect of what happens in our lives. And we'll go much deeper into that. And I don't want to miss your point about what you said earlier, which was my first chapter is actually called Heal Faster, Help Faster. And it's about how we're all, in a certain way, 4 minute mile, right? Like we've all overcome something that was really painful at some point, right? Like the passing of my parents and a million other things that people are overcoming. And what if that horrible loss could be the catalyst for not just our healing, but the healing of the world? So that's what I want to invite people to consider after they process whatever they have to process, how they could be the catalyst for universal healing.
I think that's inspiring as well because so many people that I've spoken to over the last 5 years in the podcast, something challenging has happened to them that's changed their path from maybe the conventional path that they were walking on, the sort of autopilot life that they might have been on. And often they recap these challenging events, whether it's been the loss of a family member, whether it's been a divorce, whether it's been a redundancy from a job or the failing of a business. It's rerouted them to do something else, which has turned into the thing, which has meant more to them and more to the people around them. So it's hard when you're in the moment to see it that way. But very often, many of the stories that you hear on platforms like this are from people who have been rerouted by a circumstance that they'd rather not have experienced, but they're almost glad on reflection they have.
Yeah, absolutely. I bring it back to like, listen, you and your audience, right? You guys are into fitness. I bring it back to working out. Like you're not going to get the body that you want, the fitness that you want by not having any resistance, right? Why do we go to the gym? We go to the gym to break the muscle. When you break the muscle, it grows. The heart is a muscle, man. When you break the heart, it grows. And it's like we want to experience love, we want to experience all these things, and then the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, brings heartache and go, oh, you want love? Like you're gonna have to inject so much love to this heartache that you're never gonna experience more love in your life. And then we're like, damn, I actually asked for this, but it's coming in another way. So I think experiencing the opposite of what we want is what creates that muscle, which inevitably gives us that emotional physique that we're all aiming for.
Yeah, I love that as an example. One of the things that I wrote down when I was taking notes from the book was that you were almost trying to bridge that gap between science and what we see as reality and that spirituality piece and that sort of thinking piece that many of us want to tap more into. How do you think we do that successfully?
I think we're in a really exciting time, Colin, where spirituality and science are actually meeting, and it goes to the heavy data and study of the brain, We are now in the great time where we know our brain, for example, when we wake up in the morning or right before we go to bed at night, our brain is in theta, which is we're highly suggestible, right? So why not, for example, and we're looking at it as a science more, inject our mind, right, with things that are gonna lower our fight or flight, our stress mechanism, right? So you wake up in the morning and you're meditating, or right before you go to bed at night, you write a gratitude list. Little hacks, man. This is all about simplicity. Simplicity is elegance. And then you either wake up in the morning or right before you go to bed, you're in this state of like, wow, it doesn't matter what I'm missing. I have a roof over my head. I can work out. I have a family. I have a job, whatever it is, right? And then the brain, and this is where the science comes in, our reticular activating system, which is in the back of our head, starts to scan for more things to be grateful for. So it really, it's just like, have you ever, it's like that story of you want to get a black BMW and all of a sudden you see black BMWs everywhere. That's because your mind is scanning for it. So what if we become the people that start scanning for what's good in our lives? What kind of impact would that have in our everyday?
I think you talking about fight or flight, I think a lot of people are in that state, but they almost don't realize it because it's become so normal. I definitely fall into somebody that's incredibly busy, but I have some of the practices that you recommend and we're definitely going to speak about. But unless you're conscious of that and that you actively try to get out of the fight or flight status, sometimes you don't realize that you're in this state of hyper stress day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, until it catches up on you and hits you with some of the maybe chronic disease or the unfortunate circumstances that we can fall into. How would you maybe recommend somebody realizes that they are in this hyper stress, this fight or flight state far too often?
Dude, great question, right? Because I think like we know all those people and those friends that are always like on high beta, right? So beta is like the high brain alert state that you're like, whoa, you're like a walking stress ball, right? I think the biggest litmus test is how reactive we get in our life, right? Like if you're the kind of person that somebody's going too slow in front of you and you're going ballistic, maybe that's, you ought to think about a little, mindfulness practice or meditation practice or yoga. There's so many different modalities, right, Colin? I think we're in such a rich time in our life where there's a big movement for wellness and mindfulness. So I think we all kind of have to monitor our reactivity, right? If you are the type of person that goes nuts when a telemarketer calls, you might want to take a look at that. Also, obviously, to a higher state in a higher degree is I think we're all wired to come and let things let go, right? I think letting go is the name of the game. Like we wake up, we start this life, and we gotta let go of some of our dreams. We got to let go of our youth. We got to let go of our parents, and eventually we let go of this body. So everything in life is almost like a big preparation for the ultimate letting go, which is death, right? One of the things that I would love to do is try to normalize this whole death thing because we need to get over it because it's inevitable and it's coming, right? So that's we can go deeper into that. But as we are in the learning of letting go faster, right? Let's call it letting go faster. We have two choices. How do you want to let go? Do you want to let go when someone cuts you off on the road and you're feeling compassion and empathy and you're not driving yourself through the mud in anger? Or do you want to learn to let go when the doctor calls you and goes, hey, we saw something weird on the test and you're going to have to come back next week? Because either way, you're going to have to learn to let go. Just how do you want to learn it, right? So what if we can take like micro, like quantum little leaps in letting go so we don't have to, in a way, face the bigger lessons, right? It's almost like we're learning things gradually so we don't have to then learn them the higher way, the more impactful way.
That gradual learning piece is more proactive than reactive. So let's learn the lessons earlier on so that we don't have to be in a reactive state when perhaps the lesson that we're about to get is so tough that we're not able to deal with it. Whereas if these smaller lessons earlier on are ones that we build up the capacity to overcome, it's going to put us in a much better position quicker and sooner and perhaps arm us to deal with those bigger challenges that are inevitably going to come our way because that's the nature of life.
Exactly.
More leads, more meetings, more quotes, more proposals, and closing a higher percentage of those. That's exactly what it's time to unlock with my sales masterclass. I've distilled down over 15 years of sales experience across B2B and B2C into some actionable lessons which you can benefit from. Clients that I've worked with one-to-one over the last 6 to 18 months have had incredible results, and it's now time for me to share with you an easier way to work with me rather than on a one-to-one basis. To get involved, hit the link in the show notes or under this description wherever you're watching this to join today's waiting list, and there's even some free goodies in there for you while you wait for the course to go live.
You know, this has become one of my mantras lately. It's like I get more excited not from getting what I want, but seeing who I am when I don't get what I want. That's the goal. Right before our session today, there was literally construction going on outside of my house, and I'm like, great. So I went downstairs to talk to the neighbor, but in my head I'm like, you know what? If they say yes or no, it doesn't matter. I'll set it up in my room. It's fine. There wasn't that make wrong or like, oh my God, it's the end of the world, right? Because I feel like my fight or flight is pretty under control. So I just went out there and I said, hey, is there any way you guys, how long are you gonna be here? And they're like, the whole day. And I'm like, all right. I was like, no worries, no worries. And I didn't even ask. And all of a sudden, the owner of the place ran after me. She's like, what do you need? I was like, well, I'm going to film from 9 to 10. Do you think we can pause? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. And that just reminded me of I was okay either way. I was more interested in seeing what could happen. And then in this situation, the universe said, dude, here it is. You didn't even have to ask for it. So what if we had our preferences, right? Let's call preferences. For me, a preference right now is not having a drill outside. But it's almost like I'm okay with or without that preference because I'll make things do anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you were okay with either outcome because what will be, and you'll react accordingly and do the best that you can with the circumstances that unfold.
Yeah, and it's so funny. And in this situation, and let's extrapolate this to everything in our life. I didn't even have to ask. So wouldn't that be great if we just had an intention of bigger sales, better health, better wife, okay, whatever, right? And you didn't even have to. What if like you saw this girl, you were like, damn, she's cute, and you're like, damn, and then you leave, and all of a sudden she's like, hey, and you're like, you had the intention, but I think action is important. Make no mistake, but I think energy alignment is even more powerful because we are more energy than matter. We're like 99.9999% energy and 0.00001 matter, right? So what if our energy so aligned that we just become irresistible for our desires?
It's
Why
a
not try
powerful
that
thought, isn't it? And
on?
one of the things that I was thinking about is your capacity to deal with that potentially challenging situation this morning is higher because of the other work that you've done prior, which gives you the calmness to be in that state. Because I know that 9 times out of 10, I am somebody that deals very well under pressure, deals well with a curveball, handles it very well. Often my friends or my family would look to me as somebody to speak to in a moment of challenge. I'm a big believer that the broadest shoulders carry the heaviest burden. So you as a calm, stoic person is somebody that people will gravitate towards. However, I'll give you an example. I was in London 3 weeks ago doing 5 podcasts in one day. The commute to go to the studio from the apartment I was staying in was about an hour on a busy tube. It was loud. It was aggressive. I'll be honest, I think London's not a particularly safe city nowadays with some of the stuff they've done around illegal immigration and everything that's happened in the city. And I turned up at the studio and I was more on edge and less capable of being my calm, stoic self before I had some sort of reset, which the reset was I listened to a little bit of music, walking around the block. I went and got sparkling water, decompressed, moved, and felt better before I went back to the studio. But I know in that moment, if somebody had been like, your guest has been delayed, or actually the studio, this microphone's broken, or this camera's broken, I would have been less resilient to deal with it because my typical routines and preparation work had been thrown out of the window from what I would normally do. And it took me to do something different to get back to that level and that state of the type of Colin that I want to be rather than the type of Colin that I kind of ended up for that short period of time.
Yeah, so you have that self-awareness, right? Where you know you need to sort yourself out. So I'm a big believer of do what it takes to sort yourself out. And even bigger than that, sometimes I think like the greatest thing that we could do is to have self-grace and self-compassion. What I mean by that, bro, if I'm stepping into a situation and I'm triggered, I'm triggered. So I'm
Mm.
triggered, and the worst thing I can do is when I'm triggered is make myself wrong that I'm triggered. Because now I've doubled down on like I'm triggered, and now I'm in. I should know better because I wrote a book called "Shut the Fuck Up" or whatever it is. So guess what? When I'm triggered, I make peace with it. I go, you know what? I'm triggered, and this is what's so. And then when there's no resistance, then it's almost like there's that resistance, and then you don't put resistance on it, and then it finally starts to flow again. So I can't stress enough the importance of just having that self compassion, because also inevitably, the more that you have compassion with you, the more you're going to have it for your fellow man.
Yeah, such a good point. When did you start to tap into this level of spirituality, this level of awareness, this level of compassion for yourself and for others around you? What's helped you unlock that?
I think I've always had a sensibility for personal development. You know, my mom was really into personal growth. When I was 14, my sister and I became Reiki masters, you know, like the healing, non-touch energy practice. And then when I was 20, I went to India for a month. I stayed in an ashram with a holy man named Sai Baba. And I've studied with Tony Robbins, Byron Katie, A Course in Miracles. I and then until I got to Dr. Joe Dispenza, which in my opinion is he's that dot that connected all the dots, and obviously that was after my passing, the passing of my parents. So I think it was a it got cumulative. It got bigger and bigger and
It built.
bigger. It built, and then until the time was right. You know, I've always dreamt of like, oh, I know I have something to say. I know I have a mission, but everything has to do with divine timing, right? Our divine timing. So I think for as painful as the passing of my parents was, it really was the catalyst of me realizing that I gotta put this out there. I also my parents went kind of young, right? My dad was 67, mom was 70. So I feel that I'm 10 years ahead of what my peers are going to go through. You know, I think parents start to possibly they start getting health compromise in their 80s. Things start to happen. So I also wanted to soften the landing for the people that I love and for the world, right? To kind of normalize these thoughts and how we can all start taking care of our nervous system. So we don't have to have those major experiences. We can just have little reminders to chill out along the way.
I know that you had a decorated career as a publicist, and one of the phrases I've heard you use before is that people need to be a good publicist for themselves. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I have fun with this. I lived in Hollywood for about 20 years, you know, and man, in the whole celebrity industry, everything is like, you know, life or death. And it's like you're like, dude, we're not curing cancer, but it's you know what it is. It's just, and again, and not to demonize that industry because I'm still very involved in it. I just booked Gwyneth Paltrow for a conference 2 weeks ago, and it jolted me back to that industry, and I was like, oh man, which is how do I say it? I really watch my words these days.
Of course.
It's you just have to be very compassionate, and you have to have a lot of empathy because the stakes are high. There's a lot of fear that if you make a decision and something goes wrong with the celebrity, you get fired. You know, so it's a very fear driven industry. It's a beautiful industry because it's entertainment and we all love to be entertained, but you gotta tread carefully because there's a lot of egos involved. There's just my I want to be important kicks in, and from the assistant intern all the way to the manager all the way to everywhere. So I had a lot of friends that were publicists, and in my whole thing I kind of just created the analogy in one of the chapters that's called be your own publicist, which is we all go around telling everybody our problems, man, like literally everybody that will listen, and then we get mad when people talk bad about us when we're the ones that gave them all the ammunition. It's insane. So it's like, how about we start really being mindful about the networks of conversations that we're having, because make no mistake, that problem that you're having with your girlfriend, or that money problem, or that friend problem, you start telling everybody, and that's what you're going to be known for. And they don't owe you any loyalty. If you tell a story just to tell a story, then I can repeat that story to somebody else that doesn't know you, and before you know it, reputations are formed. So how about, like, how about we become the people that before we throw the pebble, we think about the ripples? And that extrapolates to being there for a friend or being there for ourselves. It's like, dude, you don't want to be like talking about all your problems, and that doesn't mean that you got to be lying and saying something that you're not, right? Like, if you have $5 in the bank, don't go around saying you're rich, but you also don't have to call all your friends and tell them that you're broke either. So it's like, how about keeping some discretion when it comes to the things that you don't want to be known for?
I think that's a really valuable lesson. And when I was reading that, I was nodding along, because you do get people that, and I think all of us have been guilty of it at different moments in time, but almost trauma dumping at any given opportunity. And as you say, if you're the person that goes around moaning about that problem with your boss at work, or that issue in your relationship, or that fiscal challenge you're having, that's what you become known for. But you also, and again, something I learned from you is how often we say things, it almost becomes more and more of a reality, and it augments it several times over. I think when you were saying that when you speak words, it augments them 7 times over. That really is something we need to bear in mind. So if I was to come on the call with you, George, and be like, oh, I'm so stressed with work, but I'm really excited to have this podcast with you, you're going to be like, oh, Colin's stressed about work. There's no need for me to say that, because it's not helpful for anyone or any circumstance. Instead, I'm going to say to you, George, love the work you're doing. I listened to you on a podcast when you were in Dubai. I'm really excited to talk to you about your book. My audience are interested in this. Everything is shaped positively around the conversation that we're going to have, rather than dwelling on something that might be going on in one of the other pillars of my life, of which there is many, other than podcast host. So I really believe that what you're saying there is, if somebody has issues, they don't necessarily need to spread it to everyone and anyone that will listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the biggest discovery that I've encountered is, Collins, just how powerful we are. It's so amazing. And we should all take that as like a really incredible responsibility, because we are leaving way too much money on the table by the way that we talk, by the way that we talk about our friends, the way we talk about the world, and especially the way that we talk about ourselves. So how about we start monitoring those reactive tendencies that we have to say, oh, I'm scared, I'm weak, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at dating, I'm not good at making money. Shut the fuck up. Like, seriously, like, what if you could still talk in a way where you keep your integrity, but you're also not throwing yourself like under the bus, right? So people are like, hey, what's going on with the money thing? You know what? It's sorting itself out. Oh, really, Colin? But what does that mean? Like, what's up? How many gigs did you get this week? You know what? I feel really good about what's coming, and it always works out. So yeah, I feel good about it. So again, not saying like, oh man, I'm booked nonstop, I'm making $1 million a week. I'm not saying you say that, but soften that narrative, reframe how you speak about yourself. So that way you're letting space for possibility to walk in, so your situation does eventually change, if that's what you want.
Yeah, that was something I wrote down. Soften your narrative, but maintain your integrity. So it's almost giving away as much as you're willing to. And as you say, leaving the door open for it to positively change. So rather than, you're not going to lie to people, because that's obviously a negative thing. But let's not get into the drama with everyone and anyone, because that just perpetuates and just spreads and grows and grows and grows, both for them, but also for our reality too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? So let's talk about this. This is good. So having money in the bank is an environment. Your health is an environment. Your primary relationship with your significant other is an environment. Your kids' health is an environment. Your friends are an environment. So throughout life, we have all these environments. And every now and then, the universe, God, whatever your belief is, goes, you know what? I'm going to take this environment. Your kid's a drug addict. And all of a sudden, you got to muster up peace with or without that kid being the way that you want him to be. And then we are obligated to find independence from the enslavement of that environment being a healthy kid. Or sometimes the money's going to be tied in the bank, and you gotta figure out a way to have that level of peace as you pursue getting work or getting loans or whatever it is. Now let's talk about your health. Listen, at the end of the day, everything, Colin, will go, right? Because this life is temporary. Those environments will come out of whack, right? So I don't think a successful life is measured by all these environments being in perfect state, because those environments will shuffle and move. And again, maybe you're someone that's having a health situation, right? But the big win here is, how are you creating community to help you? How are you really doing what it takes to get healthy, but at the same time honoring that at least you have a body right now to ache about. So it's almost like, again, I'm not saying that we go into denial and we go into, oh, I don't want to face life. I'm actually saying the positive. Face your life. Face your life with perspective, because no matter who you are, I don't care who you are, millions of people would kill to be in your shoes. There's a rich guy right now that is homebound and can't move their body, that's looking at a homeless person going, I would kill to be you, that can walk around in your legs. So no matter who we are, again, no matter what environment we have looking like we want it or not, we can all find that internal peace through having perspective.
Within the book, there's 10 commandments, and one of the commandments really links to what you're talking about there. And I think it's a really valuable piece of advice, that if you do have an issue or a problem, you only tell one person about it, and you almost title that person as your therapist. And I found that very helpful, because as we were saying, there's a temptation to trauma dump and overshare with everyone and anyone. But if you're sharing it all the time, it's just continually going out into reality. So if somebody has that money problem, they tell like a trusted advisor, somebody they really know can help and support them, rather than sharing it with everyone and anyone at once. And that was something that I wrote down straight away, because I was thinking, how many people are not selective enough with who they tell about the issue, because it needs to be somebody they really trust that's going to keep it under wraps, actually help them with it, rather than just going back and forth and gossiping. So I love that piece of advice, George.
Yeah, thank you, man. And the second part to that commandment is to actually pick that. When you pick that one person, tell that person, hey, Colin, you're my one person. You're the only one I'm going to tell about, I just broke up. You're the only person I'm going to tell, because when I ordain you with that kind of listening, then you're like, oh man, here, tell me, bro, I am here for you. And your listening becomes so active that I might not even need advice from you. I might just need a safe space to tell my story. And in the middle of my story, I'm like, you know what? I know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to do. Thanks, man. Thank you. You're the best. And you're like, I didn't do anything. So again, I love this commandment, because at the end of the book, I go back to it, because listen, when I say one, it doesn't have to be one, bro. It could be 2 or 3 or 4, but maybe not 20, maybe not 30, because we all know that when we're going through it, right, and in a situation where one of those environments, whether it's our health or our money or relationships, is broken, then the fight or flight, which is highly activated in all of us, because there's so much stimulus out there, which is why I talk about get into some sort of mindfulness practice, like a meditation practice, like something, so we can have that system under control. When there is an emergency, we have that reactivity factor that we want to tell everybody. Almost like if we're going to get the Uber driver is going to give us that $1,000,000 advice that we wait. No, but we're not. We're just like moving furniture around the house. It's not going anywhere. If anything, it's just like stories and trauma. It's almost like scabs. And every time we talk about it, we're picking that scab. So the scab was forming, and now we're picking it again.
It's so true. And I think it's really helpful to have these rules in place, because I think many people that listen to a podcast like this one, we're very logical. So when you introduce something that's a little bit more spiritual, a little bit more about the mind and the power of our words and our thinking, having a practical implementation off the back of it makes it much easier for me to do something with. So, for example, if you're going through these issues, don't speak it into reality with too many people. Speak it into reality with just one person, one trusted advisor, and tell them it's only them that you're telling. That's me like, okay, right, cool. So I know the power of my words, but now I have an action to combine with that, which means that I make the most of the power of my words rather than it just being an ethereal thing in my head.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tried to. I really wanted to make these very common sense and pragmatic, right? Like there's so many books out there. There's so many methods. So I'm like, all right, let's have fun. Let's make a method for that person that's not necessarily into spirituality or self improvement, right? So commandment number one is if you're going to talk bad about someone, don't use their name. Call them my friend. Like, how about we start injecting anonymity when we tell stories about people? So we're not assassinating people's character. So we're not damaging people's experiences. Because, so if you and I have a friend in common, right? Tim, and you and me and Tim are three best friends, right? But Tim now and me, he has a little habit where when we go out to eat, he always forgets his credit card. And I'm like, all right, so I'm always paying for Tim now. And all of a sudden, I'm out with my boy Colin, and Colin's like, "Oh my God, George, you know what I love about Tim? Bro, he is so generous. Every time we go out to eat, he's always paying for me." And now I'm listening to this, and I'm like, "What the what?" And then, so here I have a pivotal point, right? Where, and these are conversations that we're having with our friends very
All
normally,
the time.
right? And it's all the time, right? So if I choose this moment to go, bro, that's BS, bro. Tim is so cheap. I've been paying for all this stuff. Who the hell? So I just killed two birds with one stone. I'll tell you what. So I assassinated his character because now I'm spreading that he's cheap, right? And now I assassinated your experience because now that you know this, you're going to subconsciously look for it. And in a week from now, you're going to come back to me like, oh my God, you're so right. Tim is cheap. Like we went shopping the other. So at that moment, here's what I'm faced with, right? I could hear you and be like, wow, that's so nice of Tim. And guess what I'm going to do after that? I'm going to call up homeboy, Tim, and I'm going to be like, hey, so here's the thing. From now on, you and me are gonna hang out and we're gonna do walks in the park because I'm not down with like taking care of your dinners every night. Cool? And that's it. And I don't make Tim wrong. I don't start telling him, well, Colin told me you've been paying for him. So there's ways that we can go to the source and minimize the impact on things. And then Colin, then we start becoming the kind of people that I'm constantly like tapping myself in the back and I'm patting myself in the back and I'm like, wow, I something could have gone so south, but I specifically and technically didn't do it. And now these people are not affected negatively by my injection in life. And I think that's like another layer of feeling pride about ourselves. To be someone that's constantly injecting positivity and peace is the greatest thing we could do for people and ourselves.
I think that's such a practical bit of advice because I think the temptation sometimes is to not gossip, but to say something about somebody behind their back and say something that maybe assassinates their character, as you're saying. Even if you feel like it's you sharing like an issue you've got that you want advice on, you're actually disparaging that person. So by anonymizing it with my friend or a guy from my work or a guy from my network, whatever, you remove that ability for that person to have like their reputation smeared before you've been able to do something about it. In the same way, when you phoned Tim, you were able to actually deal with things properly.
Absolutely. And also you're honoring that it's still your perspective and it's still that person that, I last week I was at this event that I was volunteering and with the girl that's like technically my boss. I love her, man. She's the coolest girl. And she said something to me. You could tell she was triggered. And then I got triggered. And then in that moment, it's like, and I'm sure we've all experienced it. So picture that moment where like someone's triggered and then you get triggered and then that person leaves and then somebody else comes, right? Just somebody else where it's that perfect moment that you go, bro, this girl's a freaking nightmare. And then the person goes, well, what happened? Lisa just came over, right? Like, that moment. So it's like, it's almost like it makes me really, Shakespeare was kind of right? Like we are in a play. Like I feel everything's like scene, end, next scene. So in that moment, she was triggered. I got triggered. She left. The other guy came to help me. And dude, I wanted to tell this story so bad. It was like, oh, I was bubbling. And I just said, no, I'm going to alchemize this right now. I'm going to turn this coal, this nasty piece of coal, into diamonds. And I didn't say it because there was really no reason to say it, because all I had to do is just like equalize myself, sort myself out, self regulate. I didn't need him to be my sounding board. I know exactly what happened. She was triggered. I got triggered. Why am I going to share the story and now infect him with this person gets triggered? So then now something else happens to him with her. And he goes, this is what she does. George was telling me the other day. You see what I'm saying? Like, how about we stop? The buck stops with us.
Yeah, so by you shutting the fuck up there, you stopped it there and it finished there, and there was no need for it to carry on. You would have generated momentum to something that didn't need momentum.
Exactly. So the question becomes like, what are we generating momentum for? Because we could also create momentum the other way. You know, about a month ago, I was at a party and I met this girl that was going to start working for my previous boss, who him and I have a great relationship. And I don't know, I met her through somebody. She's like, oh my God, I'm going to start working with Bobby on Monday. And I was like, oh, wow, cool. And I'm like, what do you know about him? And she's like, oh, I even think she asked me, she's like, I don't know anything about him. He's like a big deal in in the photo world. And I looked at her straight in the face, and it was almost like I was programming her. And I said, this is the best boss you'll ever have in your life. He is amazing. He is kind. He is fun. He is intelligent. Good for you. I'm really excited for you. And I could feel that she was just getting like brainwashed, right? But I was giving her a brainwash on something that I know is what is going to work for her. And you know what? She might have his issues with him here and there, whatever, right? But I know that I was coding the space for her to walk in with so much excitement and for her reticular activating system to look for the good things. And we could be that kind of people. We could be that kind of people.
Have you ever rubbed beef fat on your face? Sounds crazy, but that's exactly what I've been doing since January this year, when I decided to start using a much cleaner and safer moisturizer. I've been down the rabbit hole on hormone disruptors and all sorts of stuff that's in our environment that is not good for your natural hormones, especially your testosterone. I now have a filter for the tap water. I don't have fluoride in my toothpaste. I hardly eat any ultra processed foods, so it was only natural that I decided to look at what I was putting on my skin. After all, your skin is the biggest organ in your body and absorbs a hell of a lot. So in January I switched to No-Tox Towel Face Balm. It only has 4 ingredients, they're all natural and there's no disruptors in there. Well, of course my skin continues to look and be as good as it ever has, so you can benefit from that too. Hit the link in the show notes, notoxskincare.co, and use the code CALL15 for 15% off. That's so true. I think it's always really refreshing, for example, for Bobby to hear that third hand about what you said about him, when there was no actual upside for you to gain financially or reputationally doing that. You did that off your own back. And I have a number of friends who I don't see very often. They live around different parts of the UK, but when I see them and they introduce me to somebody new, they'll be like, oh, actually such and such told me about you and they said you do this podcast and you do this and this is amazing and you're great at this. And I'm like, whoa. When I'm not in the room, people are saying really nice things about me and there's no benefit to them doing that. They're just talking about me to a friend of a friend that I might one day meet. And there was no gain for them to do so other than just being positive. And those are the kind of people that you want in your corner and you want in your life, because they do things without the obvious benefits of it, but ultimately the benefit of it is I think really highly of that type of person, and I would do the exact same from them from a reciprocity perspective. I feel like indebted and like encouraged to be their cheerleader as well, even when they're not in the room, even when they're not in earshot, even when there's no obvious benefit to do so.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that, and you know why they're saying that about you? Because you're saying that about yourself and you're saying that about others. So, I'm not necessarily a religious guy, but the Bible kind of had it right. Love thy neighbor like you love thyself. If I hate you, I hate me. So I actually walk into situations and I have friendships with people that are, in my opinion, very often trauma bonding, or they create bonding by going, oh my God, did you see what Lisa was wearing? But what a clown. Or they'll send me things on Instagram and to get a response out of me. And I just leave it read, because as much as I honor that people are the way they are, and you're perfect the way you are, I also know that, wow, when no one's around, this person probably goes ham on themselves. Because if I'm the kind of person that's walking in and criticizing whoever's not in the room, that means that I'm heavily doing that to myself, when no one's around. And then also, it's like I can have friends like that, but it's not fun anymore, because if you're trashing somebody behind their back, I know you're doing that about me too. And what's like, okay, so I can tell you a few things in my life, but I'm not gonna give you the privilege of knowing my what's really going on in my heart, because I don't feel safe and I'm not really interested. But I'll give you public information stuff. But my vulnerability is something that I feel that people need to earn it. And I save that for people that I love and I trust.
You protect that. Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, if you're sent something negative on Instagram or WhatsApp, you can just leave it on read. In person,
Yeah.
I read that you said that you would just say something like, I hear you, if somebody else was gossiping
Yeah.
about somebody else. And straight away I was like, that's great, because you're not like agreeing with it, you're not encouraging it, but you're just saying, oh, I hear what you say. And then
Yeah.
you're hoping they move on and they don't continue down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah, and there's different variations, right? You could go, wow, wow, I can see how you would see that. You know what I mean? Like we all have our language, and I hear you works really well. Because yeah, I think at the end of the day, when people are telling us stories, right, people are looking for agreement. So this ties into my 10th commandment is, before you tell someone to shut the F up, you shut the F up. And I don't need to be the shut the F up police. And every time you say something negative about yourself and others, I'm like, oh, you see, Colin, this is what you're doing. You're keeping that energy alive, because it's a fine line between, see, everything that I'm saying is just a suggestion. I'm not attached that people need to agree with me or think this method is the best thing in the world. This is just an invitation. And the beauty is that the minute I start getting triggered because you're not following my advice or my doctrine on life, then I need to apply the whole method to myself, because how could I be saying that everybody's exactly who they should be, and yet I'm getting mad at you for not being the way I want you to be? So it's such a fine line, because I think like passion is beautiful, right? And this extrapolates to, you know, you have a passion for fitness. You want to be in your best fit form. You have a passion for wealth. You have a passion for relationships, for friends, or whatever. Keep that passion, go for your dreams, but at the same time, be in complete acceptance of the moment being the way it is. So it's that sweet spot between passionately wanting something and surrendering to life how it is. And I think in the sweet spot of these two, you have the generous present moment, because the generous present moment is the only thing that's real. Right now, Colin, there's nobody else in the world that I would rather talk to than you. You know why? Because we're talking. So for me to think that it should be anyone else is for me to be insane and not aligned with reality. And then after this moment, it will be, you know, my boss or the credit card company or my lover or whoever it is, right? But in this moment, you're the one. And then the next person will be the one, and it'll be the cop on the street pulling me over to get a ticket. And then, you know what I mean? So then life is just all these scenes of the one, the one, the one, the one, the one. And I think the more that we can almost like use our toolbox and use all these tools to get into relationship with the present moment, the more that we're going to enjoy this thing.
That's right. And what we were speaking about there is that balancing act between making sure that we're not judging others while you're still living your truth with the shut the fuck up method and this non-judgmental open lifestyle that you're living. But when you're exposed to somebody who's, I'm not going to say refusing, but living out of alignment with it, not having like hate in your heart towards them or disappointment or anger, but just being like, oh, well, I'll just lead by example in my way and I'll shut the fuck up and I'll do my thing. And I hope that in the future they come on this journey with me and they live like this with me, but they don't have to if they don't want to.
Oh, absolutely. Because, that, let's call them, the enemy, the person that's not agreeing with you, the person that's triggering us, right? That's pulling resistance. Because at the end of the day, listen, what is a friend? A friend's just a cute little idiot that agrees with everything we're doing. It's like, it's like watching Netflix and like eating popcorn. It's delicious, right? But an enemy, someone that's resisting, oh man, that is the angel, because the ones that are resisting our way of being or our point of views or whatever, that's the one that's showing us our arrogance, our lack of compassion, our dependency on being right. So I mean, that's the real gold. That's the real gold. I talk about it in the book. I give this example, this story about, like before, hypothetically, before we come down to earth, we have these desires, and you raise your hand and you go, oh, I want to be able to feel the most amount of love in the world. And then somebody else raises their hand. They're like, I'll do that for you. I'll hurt you so much that the only way you're going to get out of this is by finally loving me and loving you unconditionally. So it's like, we want abundance, we want all these things. And then all of a sudden, like, there's fraud in our account. And we're like, oh my God. And it's like, well, could abundance be just letting go of wanting things to be the way we want them to? Like, we're constantly getting the lessons that we need. And sometimes I think that what we want gets in the way of what we need.
Yeah, I also think it's helpful to have things to aim away from as well as to aim towards. So when we see examples of how things are done and we're not comfortable with it, and we see that as that somebody holding up a mirror to ourselves, and you thinking, goodness me, I'm like that when I am not the way that I want to be. So goodness me, I'm going to aim away from that. And I think that can be helpful too. So if we're exposed to somebody who's always gossiping, always angry, always triggered, which is one of the words we've used, and they're doing it continually, and you can just see hate in their heart, we know that when we're our worst self, we are closer to that. So it's better to lean into that idealized version of ourselves that we want to be, in that truer version of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I think of, like, when celebrities go through their live struggles, right? And they're in the center stage for all of us to watch. Like, man, they're giving us such a huge favor, because they're basically saying, look at what you should try to stay away from, right? And so we don't have to learn that lesson. We can learn it through them, and viscerally, and not through our own experiences. So sometimes I look at, without getting into specific names, but the people that we demonize the most in the world, right? That we're like, oh my God, I wish I was nothing like him or her. They're kind of taking a bullet for us, so we can learn lessons without having to personally go through them, in a way.
That's right. I think history is a great indicator of that. But certainly in modern culture, celebrity, social media, the amount of information we have available at how people live their lives, we can certainly see examples of people who've lost their values and lost the control of what we would want to be in our best self.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think everything is on public display, and people talk about, social media, for example. Like, I I feel like I have a pretty healthy relationship with it, but some people might be like, no, you don't, and some people might be like, no, you're fine. But for me, I choose to see social media as a place where not only I can get my message out, but I can, you know more or less what's going on in the world, but also I gotta monitor myself, right? Because doom scrolling is not something that I want to be doing that much. So you pull yourself out of it. So everything in life has in its seed salvation or destruction, right? It's just about how can we, take small dosages of things, and also choose to see things for the good parts about it, not in denial of the bad stuff, right? But also be like, you know what, I find it very inspiring at times when I look at Instagram. There's really beautiful stories, and there's that other stuff too, but I monitor my information intake on that.
I like that. It's how you view things rather than what they actually are at times.
Oh yeah, no, everything is
Perception.
perspective. Everything is perspective and perception, and again, that goes back to what I was saying before. Like, don't leave money on the table by like, when I meet somebody now that I don't like, I tell myself in my head, the first thing I say is, I'm gonna be so wrong about you. I'm gonna be so wrong about you. I'm gonna find the story in my mind, which maybe you didn't say hi to me when you walked into the room, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe he's in a rush, or maybe right now they didn't really they had to scan too many things, and I can find a narrative that doesn't take something personal, right? I
Yes.
can find that. Like maybe you were, if nothing's working, then you were dropped as a baby a bunch of times. Like maybe I can consider, because at the end of the day, I'm never going to know why anyone is the way they are. So I might as well just pick a story that gives me peace and self-regulates me and have a good life.
One of the last questions I want to ask you, George, was around if you had one really strong piece of advice for somebody to implement the shut the fuck up method, what would that be for them to do off the back of today's podcast?
I think that having a relationship with the thought of millions of people would kill to be in your shoes is something that I'm really going to like. I'm really into these days, and I do a lot of work with people that have MS and ALS and cancer, and I take care of them in different retreats, and perspective is king. You know what I mean? I think we need to get a grip on the perspective of what we think a successful life is, and really hone in into a gratitude practice. I think every day, no matter what, even if it's one word, wake up in the morning and write three things that you're grateful for. You can breathe with no pain. How about that? There's a roof over your head and there's some sort of food situation in your fridge. Those three things alone, acknowledging them will create a plethora of other things to be grateful for. So remember, no matter who you are, millions of people would kill to be in your shoes.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I was joking with my mum yesterday when I saw her. I had a flu earlier this week, and I didn't tell anyone about it because I was reading your book before, and I was like, I'm not telling anyone that I'm not well, because it was because then it become true. And I said to my mum, the unhealthy or the ill man only wants one thing: to feel better. The healthy man, he wants everything and anything all at once. And in my gratitude journal last night before going to bed, and I do it 5 minutes before bed because that's when we're most susceptible to taking in those thoughts and program ourselves for the next day. It was all about, I'm looking forward to podcasting tomorrow. I'll be clearer spoken than I was today because of the nature of my flu shifting. And I woke up and I just felt excited and ready for the day. And when we simplify things down, and I think things like being a little bit unwell earlier in the week makes you more grateful for starting to feel clearer now and maybe getting back to the gym tomorrow and doing the things that I love. And it puts things into perspective in the same way you spending time around people who are in chronic illness and really struggling. It makes you feel more grateful for your healthy body, for your breath, for your movement, for your energy that we take for granted so often.
Absolutely, man. You got it. I was talking to this friend of mine yesterday who was going through some money situation, and I'll leave you with this. We were laughing because, like, man, worrying about money is a luxury because that means that you're healthy.
Yeah.
Because if you weren't healthy,
it's a secondary need.
Go out the window. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
George,
so take it as a luxury.
Yeah, you're so right, George. I've loved today's conversation. I know the listeners will have as well. If they want to continue the conversation with you, get their hands on the Shut the Fuck Up method, where should they head towards?
Yeah, they can. My site is stfumethod.com. You could also find all of this great merch. And in my email's there, a way to get a hold of me, finding out about retreats. My social media is at Jorge Perez Jr. And let's talk. And I would love to stay in touch with you and your listeners. And thank you so much for this time.
Appreciate you, George. Those will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you to the listener for listening. I'll be back to speak to you guys again